Welcome, everyone, to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host, and today we've got a really incredible guest with Bart Fanelli. Bart is not only the founder of Skillibrium, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what Skillibrium is, but Bart, you're a former CRO. You've gone through an IPO, you've gone through two unicorns, you've got a lot of experience, and now you really help service the CRO space. So you're an expert on the topic at hand today, which is why do B2B CROs fail so quickly? We've got the second shortest tenure right behind and not very far behind CMOs. So the finger seems to be pointing in one or two directions very quickly. We want to unpack that today. But before we do that, I'd love to have you just give us a little bit more of an understanding about your background and what you're doing at Skillibrium.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. And I think we'll have a spirited conversation about this important topic. But I can tell you, I'll speak from my perspective, and everyone has their own perspective. I've got a lot of scar tissue. I'm what they call a journeyman. So I've learned the craft by doing the craft, not by a book, so to speak. So my career has been from inside sales, phone selling, all the way through to senior vice president to CRO, running global revenue organizations. Now, I think the cool part about what I do is it's based on life, real experiences in dynamic circumstances. We're applying it from a template, a cadence, a coaching, and then a leadership courage or management courage perspective to make the right decisions, which aren't always the most popular decisions. That is where I think the difference is in the great leaders and the okay leaders. The ones that last the longest make the hard decisions that are the right decisions for the business, and the ones that don't shy away from those.
That sounds like a fabulous place to start because we all know those hard decisions in everything that we do, but decisions aren't always ours. Decisions are collective, decisions come down from above. Unpack that a little bit. Let's start there.
Well, you nailed it. They're not always ours. They come down from above. When I think about this from the CRO perspective, a CRO is a CEO of go-to-market, depending on how the organization is designed. I don't think that's always the case, unfortunately, or the experience doesn't allow whomever the person is to operate that way, or the organization that they're in. It has not been understood well enough to realize there's no chance for the person to operate that way. So it really is that complex, which makes the conversation so enjoyable and such a great topic. So the challenge for me is if you come into an organization, it can be any organization, big or small, the title and the remit have to match. So CRO means you are an officer and you are responsible for the orchestration, the design, the redesign, the implementation, the accountability, the metrics of a model that takes a company to the next level. It is not what many think it is. Here's a number, go make it. That's not how it works. That is the 18-month tenure max. The long enduring tenure has the courage and the dialogue with the board and the CEO, and is given that seat at the table to not only go chase the number, but to re-architect and realign how the company goes and chases that number. Otherwise, it's a losing proposition. From my experience, I've had 3 different experiences that I can compare, and I've talked with dozens of companies and executives doing it with them, for them, helping them. And it's different everywhere. That's the big mystery. Like, why is it different everywhere? It's not, and it's somewhat scientific, somewhat artistic. It is based on experience and segment in SaaS tech. So it's complex, highly complex.
Where we started this line of conversation out was that sometimes you just had to make the right decisions that aren't the popular decisions. Give us an example of what you're talking about there.
I can give you a story behind it. So we'll go one step prior. And as you come into an organization, provided you've done a good level of discovery and alignment at the executive level. That's rule number one. Because even if you have, it doesn't mean you're going to get what you've uncovered. And there's surprises everywhere. There's political surprises and affiliations. But this is going to be a great one, by the way. I'm going to give you an example, and it's going to be related to your history as the CMO. So there's always a challenge in every organization on lead flow or quality of lead or type of funnel that's created, whether or not marketing is responsible for pipeline, or if the sellers are responsible for pipeline and marketing is responsible for programs and awareness and brand. I mean, that alone is a web of confusion for everybody in the industry. It's just hard. We know that. So the idea being clarity is the responsibility of the CMO and the CRO in that case, and the CEO has to be an observer and a tiebreaker, so to speak, but can't get in the way. Most of the time, a seller might come in, and if they're not deftly experienced at architecting an organization in an efficient way, they just go start chasing the number. And then they start pointing fingers at marketing. And it's pointless. It doesn't help anybody. As soon as that pattern starts, it's the beginning of the end, because nobody is accountable, because nobody's in agreement, and nothing changes. I'll give you an example. Top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. The numbers that are in the funnel in those segments are somewhat irrelevant, dependent on the age or the SLA that is met in calling them. So if you're not, and you know this as a marketer and someone in the industry for years and experience, if you're not calling near immediately on a lead, you can just flush it. It doesn't work. So when anyone suggests that, look, the funnel's got 50,000 top of funnel, 30,000 middle, and actually, no, that's probably wrong. We should unpack that now before we go down this path together and dig a hole we'll never get out of. Hence, 16 to 18 months for both of us. That's the hard conversation. Then it goes to the BDR, SDR role. Who's the ICP? And does the ICP want to have a conversation with likely a very junior or not really experienced, because it's an entry role, with someone and then potentially get handed off to someone else, which produces a large gap of confusion. Every organization and everybody that I speak with says the same exact thing. That model's hard. We can't get it right. SDRs and BDRs are meeting their numbers. AEs or AMs or whomever, they're not following up, or there's a handoff and we shouldn't have a handoff. They're not a team. There's a pool. Like, there's so many different ways to think about it. So first experience years ago, giant funnel, all these metrics. Marketing is responsible for pipeline is the tagline. We own pipeline. I'm like, well, actually, you really don't. The sellers have to own their pipeline because they decide what's qualified and not, and then they have to execute against it. So let's make that hard decision first. From there, it's, does the SDR actually have a chance at having a conversation with the ICP? So we'll use an example in security and compliance, like in the security space, highly specified. You get a security practitioner that might be the ICP at a certain level of your product in a SaaS tech, and it could be in any industry vertical. It is a highly specialized role, and they are highly suspect. How do we expect as a company an SDR that is first level out of college learning an industry to have a decent conversation? They're not going to take the call. It doesn't work. Then they're going to send at the same time non-customized and irrelevant spam. Then we're going to complain as a field organization that we're not getting quality leads, and that's part of that downward spiral. So it becomes a discussion around what is age appropriate. Well, who's our buyer, and what's the segment, and what's the skill level in this case of an SDR, BDR, and how does it align with segments? And we usually generalize it, and that's wrong. So my strategy usually has been, well, the SDRs and BDRs, do they aspire to carry a quota one day? Yeah, they do. Well, why wouldn't we hyper train them and on doing the role end to end and give them a very small quota as an ISR so that they have full accountability and they understand over time the progressive nature of what they're doing so they can become and serve the field as a pod where they're learning and doing it the right way. So I did that. I went through that process and I was not popular at all. I was not popular for making the change, but I'll share how we did it and why it worked. We brought all of the SDR, BDRs in a room. We gave them a choice instead of just making the change. It was a very adult way to do it. If your intention is to carry a quota one day, we're going to build a program to make you an inside sales rep and give you a quota. You have that choice. If you aspire to do something different and you want to be an SDR, BDR, or you want to do a role that is less stressful as you learn, that's fine too. We'll align you with the appropriate segment so that you can have a good chance, at least generating the right level of interest. So I'll pause because you probably have a bunch of questions and we'll unpack it. But I will tell you, it worked because many of the ISRs that were in that program are highly successful field reps and now leaders. Whereas in other companies, they get stuck. I can't name the companies, but they get stuck as ISRs or BDRs because no one treats the role as a trajectory. So even though the intent when I did this was 100% transparent, you had a choice. I had a very unique comments even online publicly and doesn't hates BDRs, hates SDRs or blah, 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 doesn't like this, doesn't like that. I'm like, that's not true.
So the first rule of being a CRO is you've got to have thick skin. That's my big takeaway.
Well, yes, there is. And this is hard. This is the hardest part because usually when you go in it in a senior role like that, the first time you want to please everybody and it's not what it's about. That's the 18-month run. You only get it. You're not going to please everybody. And in fact, you're not going to please the board. You're not going to please your boss and you're not going to please your employees, but you have to bring them on a journey and help them understand why a pragmatic approach that is highly intentional and holds people highly accountable is the only way it works.
Well, you're right. I have a set of questions I want to ask, and I have about 10 based on what you're just saying.
Take us anywhere you want.
What I want to do is I want to go back to at the very beginning, you were talking about the CRO is in charge of the go-to-market strategy, in charge of sales, in charge of marketing, in charge of customer success. Now, that right there has opposing goals in a lot of different organizations because there's one side, which is even though you're in charge of all go-to-market, there's this quota this month you've got to hit. CEOs asking daily about it. At the board meeting, they're asking about it. They're asking about next quarter. So you've got a very short-term go-to-market focus. Also, over marketing and customer success. 30 to 40% of a company's new revenue shouldn't be coming from new logos, should be from existing customers and expanding those relationships.
Contracts are in place. We know people. We can start to add on new capabilities or offering. Yeah, totally.
So that's a longer term perspective, but needs a constant motion against it. Yet customer expansion gets about this much focus. New logo development gets about this much focus. The other part of it is that we take sales cycles away when we build the right reputation behind the brand. We establish ourselves as experts, whether it's an SDR, whether it's an AE, goes in as a trusted advisor. You're not trying to prove that you understand what's going on and the challenges in the industry. You can get right to that consultative role. The brand in doing all that is extremely important. In fact, I had a 3-time B2B CMO on that talked about today's brand is tomorrow's demand. These are competing. These are all competing.
Well, they shouldn't be. And this is the dialogue, right? They shouldn't be. And that's where having a really strong coach or champion to help you understand this, that's done it before, if you're coming into the role new,
Yeah.
and you've never made the mistakes yourself, is the way to do it. You have to be coachable as a senior executive. This is another flaw. CEOs and senior executives all day long are not coachable. They think they have every single answer, and we don't. We know we can minimize risk and friction, but we're not going to always be right. And others have seen it, and we should have counsel and we should have coaching conversations, and we should be coachable, as should our boss, hence CEO, as should the board, who is usually the most removed from reality. They have not carried the bag in forever, usually, and some have never carried the bag.
Right.
So this comes to management courage in the role where you have to educate everybody up and down, contributors to you, you to your CEO and to your board, or however the org's structured. Sometimes the CRO doesn't have the marketing remit. I think it's fine either way, personally, provided the relationship is there. Sometimes the one I'm more passionate about is they don't have the full life cycle customer touch. They don't have customer success. That's the flaw. And that is a broken model. Now, this comes back to short-term needs and long-term repeatability. So you nailed it with the place to get short-term revenue is immediately within your customer base. In fact, the majority of senior leaders, boards, or CEOs that I talk with, they, in error, put all of their energy in new logos and literal zero energy in the long tail of customer experience in the base. And that's a flaw. So you have to be highly intentional about it. There are frameworks that help you do that. So therefore, it takes management courage to have those conversations, first of all. They're hard conversations, and you have to shift left as quickly as you can and start to tackle those while you're making the number, which is really hard to do. And most companies aren't making the number. It's been a while. I haven't found many executives that are comfortable with the number, even at the corporate level or at the deployed level. Like there's an overassignment issue in a lot of companies that have struggled because that's how they protect themselves. That's a death curse. It doesn't work, because culturally, that's the brand you're talking about. Now we're getting into this all fits together hand in glove. I used to get made fun of by people in the industry. Like, no, this is hand in glove. If you're not all on the same exact playbook in swim lanes, operating on complementary activities that fit together in a cycle with your client, new or existing, you're missing the mark.
Yeah.
You can't make the number, you can't retool the business, and you can't serve your clients the right way in order to satisfy a CEO and the board. So I'll give you an example. Take a gig and travel to the first board meeting, crash and burn in the board meeting. Okay. I was talking completely different language. All they wanted was metrics, but I had an understanding of what needed to change. So I wanted to go into what needed to change. They wanted numbers. And in fact, they wanted to know how many quota carriers I could hire.
That's the problem that needs to be solved is we just need more bags on the street.
Come on, man. It's like, sure, let's add gasoline to what's not working, and then let's throw a pack of matches in it and
Right.
see what happens. It's such a short-sighted conversation that I get angry when it happens. It has less to do with how many people you have on the street and more to do with the quality of how they represent your brand in those dialogues with either the channel, with either their clients, or with the prospects. And it all has to be in violent agreement with what sales and marketing and the CEO decides is the journey that we're going on over the years to come. Otherwise, forget it. You're just chasing a number. And it does not work. That's why CROs and CMOs get pushed out of the business incorrectly in a lot of cases, because their remit is usually not understood even by certain CEOs or boards. So they don't ever get the chance that they need. So long story short, board asks me the question. I go, I have no idea. I go, I don't even know what we have. You got to give me a quarter or two. I got to go figure it out. Meaning I hadn't been in front of everybody. I had my assumptions from what I'd seen, but I was going to go travel and get in front of everybody. Are the leaders right? Is the playbook right? Is there a cross-functional collaboration? Sales, technical sales, post-sales? Don't know yet. So by the time next board meeting, we make the corporate number. We didn't make the field number, but we made the corporate number. Fortunately, it wasn't too far of an overassignment. And we took 18 people out of the business that weren't contributing. Now, as an adult, that's a hard thing to do in a quarter, unless you really have integrity on why you're doing it and what the benefits are going to be to the business and how you're then going to avoid the mistake of those 18 as an example going forward, which is, it's pretty simple when we think about it. If someone's not producing their activity levels, leading indicators of activity, unique personas in a meeting or in an account that they're talking to on a regular basis, new opportunities to the pipeline, progression of existing opportunities through their trajectory, their sales process, strong understanding of their offering and how it relates to personas in an account. It's pretty obvious when you get in a QBR, but we accept it. When they're terrible at it, we accept it because it's hard to remove someone. You feel bad. Well, as a CRO, your responsibility is shared. You want to build a strong team and leaders that can be successful. You want to serve your CEO and your board so that we can make a number and grow and be rewarded. When you look at it that way, keeping the 18 people that aren't capable of taking the company to the next level that's a non-starter. You're not going to do it. So 18 out, cost basis goes down. Make the commit. Board goes, oh, wow, that's pretty good. Like, yeah, it's pretty logical. They weren't doing anything and we were paying them. So now let's talk about what the ones we have are doing well. And let's unpack that. Let's define our process for onboarding new employees, training them up, getting them on brand, getting them on message. And we're going to use the money that we took out of the bottom line to fund that program. That program is going to build resilience in the business over time, and we're going to operate within a framework where we're going to hold people accountable to it, and we're going to collectively build the framework together. So make the number, rebuild for scale incrementally, week over week, month over month, quarter over quarter, align the teams, sales, technical sales, post sales. There's a framework called LAIR in SaaS tech, land, adopt, expand, renew. Well, there's this cross section of efficiency that starts to surface. And this is now a Skillibrium concept. When you have a segment and a team, sales, tech sales, post sales, and they serve an ICP in a segment, 80% of what they talk about with that client is reusable in every conversation. But we don't even think about that. Now, conversational intelligence is getting better and recaps are great. But to think that those orgs would live under separate leadership completely conflicts the notion that they serve the same experience to a customer on the other side. Right. And that's the big flaw. You just have to align your people, align your message, and repeat. Hold accountable and measure. And then you continue and continue and continue. By the way, that narrative is pretty defensible at the board level. It's also pretty defensible as you're championing your teams to go into the battle, provided you narrate to them that way. And that's what I think a real strong CRO or senior VP that is aspiring to be a CRO, that's the narrative they have to own. However, the typical is I'm going to go out into the field and start doing deals with my people, and we're going to magically save the day and make the number. And then guess what? You have to do it again the next quarter, but you have the same anchor holding you back because you haven't fixed the machinery.
After all of your experience, you've been going through so much of it here, you started Skillibrium because there was a hole in the go-to-market process.
Yeah.
I want that learning. What was the challenge that you set out to solve with Skillibrium? If you could give us the highlights of that so that we can learn, because you obviously set out to fix a problem, right?
Yes, it's a mission, and it's a long mission. Like, this will be the last thing that I do. And I'll continue to on this mission to try to serve the SaaS tech and leadership communities an easy way to embrace how to go build or rebuild a company and go to market. So what we found, and through our experience and through our pattern matching, is that from onboarding to offboarding by role, you have to have alignment in your operating model. So the easiest is the trifecta: sales, technical sales, and post sales. So those three folks share in the winning and the losing of every customer without question. So if we center on how we onboard those three roles, how they learn and rehearse their jobs, if we match them to a template or an asset that they can use in their job that's shared, as an example, pieces of an account plan can be very specific to how you navigate an opportunity, because multiple opportunities and all that intelligence bundled together become chapters in an account plan. It's not really that hard, especially if you don't treat your opportunities as transactions. They're not. They're the start of a long-term relationship where your intelligence and continuity of sales, tech sales, and post sales with that client has to remain intact. The biggest problem, if you survey buyers, and I think Gartner did it recently, they're like, the buying experience is just horrible. It's horrible. Reps change, SEs change, customer success changes. And guess what? The client calls in after they bought, and they got to ask the customer success or the PS team that's deploying has to ask them, well, let's start from the beginning. What's the project that we're focused on? Well, of course, the buying experience is horrible. So what we've learned, and we have really strong metrics that prove this. In fact, we won an award. This was a model we started at Splunk, where we onboarded sales, tech sales, and post sales, along with value consulting, at the same time, in the same templates and frameworks that we would use to go to market. And then we coached and developed those roles through their leaders against those templates with a fundamental baseline of language, tools, and workflows. We didn't deviate from it at all the way through to coaching to a 4-box on skill and will, and offboarding where the people weren't coachable enough to make the change to do the job. If you can master that process from end to end, onboarding, learning, practicing, executing, coaching, remediating. If they won't remediate, retiring and recruiting immediately so you can maintain balanced performance amongst teams that serve clients. Sounds easy, but it's not. It's really hard.
Really hard, because that's a different kind of playbook.
It's the only playbook that scales. It scales because we go back to the notion that 80% of our conversational selling with our client, all that information should be reusable and shareable among sales, tech sales, and post sales. Very logical, but it's hard for companies to re-architect the way they're designed to do that. And they have to, or they will fall behind. They will fail. They will have the 16 to 18-month cycle, and they'll start over. Here's what usually happens. The reason the 16 to 18 months or whatever it may be for CMO, CRO is the board and the CEO doesn't have enough defensible evidence to defend you in the role. So what we all forget is, as a CRO, you're in sales. You're selling your vision and your strategy and your capabilities of executing against that to your CEO, with your CMO, with your customer success executive, to the CEO and the board. And everybody's got to be on the same page. More importantly, and we didn't touch on this yet, the CFO is equally as important. In fact, that's where the money comes from to do all of this. Right. And I have never met a CFO that doesn't go, this is exactly how we should be talking, because they want to know what's going to change the behavior in the field that delivers the customer experience that keeps the CEO and the board off everybody's back. It's a team sport. So the flaw is CRO or SVP comes in and they chase the number, and then they expect that things to change, and they don't. They got to unpack the flaws in the business, repack it in a repeatable way to serve the customer base, build repeatable learning, build repeatable leading indicators that push the lagging indicators of performance. And that's a team sport of integrating everybody together and deciding what that is. And you got to get in the room to do it. It's heavy lifting.
It sounds a lot different than just we need to hire more quota carrier.
It's the complete opposite. I think it's foolish to just think you can out hire for scale, hire more people and throw them in the field, give them a bag and think magic's going to happen. When we had free money, that kind of worked, kind of. But now it's really coming back to, and I'm thankful for this, by the way, there is way more intentionality in the operating model that we're paying attention to. The VCs care more, the private equity firms care more, boards care more, and the CEOs care more. But the urgency is still there. So you have to figure out how to do both. And that was how this thing started. It was new logos or install base. And I can tell you, you got to do both, but you're going to get your short-term money from your install base because they've already got contracts in place and you already have relationships.
Right.
So you serve them really well and they pay you massive dividends while you're fixing your ability to land as a professional.
I just had a podcast with a woman who was a chief customer success officer. Her team was attributed to 21 million a year in average revenues. The sales team, each member is attributed to 300,000.
I believe it's a design principle that has to change. I think it becomes more shared than everybody believes. And I'm a believer that we'll get to a point where the reward is shared and the design of the comp plans and the roles is more of a shared pod model where there's many CEOs running their books of business. Think about there's no better way than to develop teams that are highly self-sufficient and rewarded for doing it the right way, meaning landing with integrity. The customer adopts very quickly because they bought exactly what you sold them, which was what they needed and nothing more. They then buy more faster, giving you a rich net retention rate. And they then, without even having to try, they keep buying and renewing and extending. And you create a flywheel. Now, that's where we center ourselves as Skillibrium in helping CROs and CEOs and chief sales officers or customer officers rethink about the bottoms up approach and the top down approach at the same time to get it right in a repeatable way. And it's a long, slow process, but you have to start.
If there was one takeaway that you wanted people to have, like 30 seconds, this is what I want you to remember after watching this podcast, what would that be?
I'm going to give you more than one because I want to be fair to the CRO and then the contributor. For CROs, it is absolutely grounding themselves in the management courage to have the hard conversations immediately. Nothing changes when we think everything is going to be fine if we just chase the number. Now, if it's not the CRO, there better be a really strong operational leader that has the latitude in the company to do it. And that's a teaming effect that works really well. Some are a pair like that. I played that role with Tom Schodorf at Splunk. I was peers at the end for a couple of years, all of the global executives. We were arm in arm. We had a defined model and we executed it the right way, the same way every time as best possible. There was no disconnection. So management courage is number one. You have to be able to define your operating model and your metrics, be honest about whether you're capable or not, and have the hard conversations and make the appropriate changes as quickly as possible with integrity, telling everybody why and explaining to everybody from CEO to the board down to contributors how we're going on this journey together. That's the first. Then if I'm a contributor or someone reporting up into that CRO, we have to be coachable. And we want to live in a culture like this. We just don't know it yet most of the time. A growth culture that is going to help me learn the right way to do this, because as a young seller or ISR or SDR, I don't know any better. And the first culture that I get exposed to that shows me the right way, that should be a coaching culture. It should be a hard conversation culture. It should be a development culture. If I'm not willing to go on that journey, they should be having hard conversations with me because the company is what we are all serving as well as ourselves. And if we serve the company well, guess what? We're all upwardly mobile because the company's going to grow and become resilient. And it's a meritocratic approach. We don't do it because it's volume, fear, speed, and confusion on what the right way to do it is. And there really is only one right way. It's to create a resilient and integrated culture of coaching and development. If someone's not coachable, they have to be removed. And it could be anybody at any level at any given time. Therefore, you have a unified approach. We call it a one team approach. There's only one team. You can't have factions.
Well, Bart, I got to tell you, I know there's going to be people that have questions after this. Would it be appropriate if we gave out maybe your link to your LinkedIn profile?
Yeah, it would be my pleasure. We are in the sweet spot of helping others, messaging to others, sharing what we know works at scale based on a lot of scar tissue and experience, and talking to a lot of people and doing it ourselves for years. That's why I'm in the happy spot, happiest place in my career right now. I get to help people and I have defensible proof and experience and relationships like with you where we can talk about it and we know it's real. I want to bring everybody with you and others on this journey. Like there's a better way to do all of this.
Fantastic. We'll look forward to more conversations like this. I just appreciate you coming on.
Well, I'm privileged and honored to be here. Thank you very much for having me. It was great.